All right, in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to get wider appearing clavicles in the big 2026. Starting off, we got number 5, fraud maxing. All right, so the fastest way to look like you actually have wider shoulders is to wear clothing that makes you look like you have wider shoulders. You can call this, gay and fraudulent. However, you're kind of forgetting something. This is 2026, okay? So women want a dude that's 6 foot, 6 figures, and 6 inches. Now, how does that tie into clavicles? Well, dating is a game, right? And you have to play it to win. Girls will wear makeup and enhance themselves. So, wearing this isn't too crazy, right? This one is a little excessive. I think this one has like even bigger arms. But if you just have a shirt like this where it's just like got a little shoulder pad, I'll show you another example later. A little shoulder pad like this underneath your regular clothing, this isn't that crazy to have, especially during nighttime game, because at night the only thing the girl has to go off is your looks and also your build, really, because they're only with you for a short amount of time. So if you're wearing something like this will definitely help out in the short term. And this is kind of an extreme, but at the very least you need to be wearing something more like this, right? A tight fitted tee, either black or white, doesn't really matter. You need to be wearing that because this guy here, real ones know this guy works out. You can kind of tell by the traps here, but here's the thing, you can't even see that because he's got a baggy tee on, and the difference is just having a nice tee, right? Like something like this doesn't have to be super crazy, something fitted. This is going to make all the difference because it actually shows off your frame. If you have big ass baggy tees, the huzz aren't going to see your frame, right? And we got to get every little percentage in our favor to actually win, because your whole sexual value is going to be perceived through a very brief interaction. So we have to get that percentage up no matter what. If you don't have this frame, obviously build up to it, but this is a good way to kind of cope. That is your intentions and you're running daytime game or nighttime game. I wouldn't probably wear this during daytime. I feel like that's a little too crazy, but nighttime, it's going to be, harder to see you. You're in a club, it's dark. So you need like the frame advantage, right? All right, so here I'm just going to give you guys some elite ball knowledge, okay? If you're ever going on a first date with a girl, you want to embody the dad archetype, all right? So white tee, blue jeans, something casual, nothing crazy. Now, why are we doing this? Because this ties into Carl Jung. Now, who is Carl Jung? He's a very famous psychologist. And basically, to keep it short, we want to embody the archetype of the dad, especially on first dates. All right, you need to be wearing this on a first date because this is going to make you seem like a protector, provider, right? And it's going to be on a subconscious level. It's going to be on a subconscious level. Basically, why we're doing this is because it has to do with your conscious and your subconscious mind. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but we make 80% of our decisions roughly through our subconscious mind, and we don't even realize we're doing it. We're very asleep. And why it's important is because if you embody this dad archetype, right? If you make her feel safe, protected, loved, and all that, obviously she's going to like you very fast initially, and you're going to win her over basically within the first date subconsciously, because in her subconscious, most girls have daddy issues. All right, this is just the facts, especially in 2026, and you're meeting club rats or wherever you're finding the huzz. But basically, just to keep it short, become the dad on the date and you will have great results. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go super crazy and you need to buy height boosters, colored contacts, if you want to role play as an Uchiha, or like shoulder pads. By the way, a shirt like this is probably more so what I would go for if I was going to do this. I would just get a shirt with shoulder pads. To be honest though, I don't do this yet, but if I did night game, there's nothing wrong with winning. I just want to see you guys win. Height boosters, you already wear fucking Air Forces or Air Maxes, whatever. They already have the height boosters. I wouldn't wear these. What I would do is I would get height booster socks. Yeah, so basically something more like this, something with like a little bit of padding, because with the shoes, people can see your lifts sometimes. It looks very goofy on some people. Like you can tell they're wearing height boosters, but if you wear this, even if you take your shoes off, it's a little less noticeable. So personally, I would go with these. And yeah, I don't think you should be wearing colored contacts because most chicks especially are probably going to be able to tell. But yeah, I don't know. You do you. If you want to do that, go ahead. At the very least though, you need to be wearing a tight fitted tee, you know, something more like this, right? Just because like if you don't have that frame, then you can't really be walking around. Let's say you're like 5'2" and you don't have a good frame, then you can't really be walking around competing with all the other guys around you. Sorry to say, but that's kind of just what it is, unless you're really, really rich or good looking. But adding an extra like 2 to 3 inches on your shoulders is going to have a huge benefit to your SMV. All right, number 4 is going to be delt maxing. All right, your lateral delt or your side delt runs from your shoulder cap outward. Okay, right? Every fucking millimeter of your side delt thickness is going to be directly translated to shoulder width, and it's going to extend your frame. And you might be leaving this until the very end of your workout and you're just, you know, spamming lateral raises, but I want you to reconsider this. Just take a look here. Here we have Vegeta and we have Trunks, okay? Now, the frame on this form is awesome, but why? Yeah, the arms here are fucking massive, okay? But what really builds that, what stands out the most, look at it, it's the side delt, right? You see this shit? This is why this frame is so iconic. It's because of the shoulders, and specifically what builds that is your side delt, right? So when you're training this, you can't leave this until the very end of your workout. You need to be prioritizing this because this is what builds your shape, right? Wide shoulders equals lateral head, which means imposing, right? They shouldn't be an afterthought, okay? I want you to really understand that. You need to be training them heavy enough to actually grow, and you need to be training them often, since that's what's actually going to fill out this frame and make you look a lot wider. And you should be training them, you know, fresh into the workout and not at the very end. And if you're just, you know, spamming lateral raises at the end of your workout and you're not actually trying to prioritize your shoulder growth, then you're leaving a lot of gains on the table. The exercises that I personally love are cable lateral raises, but from a low pulley position like this, and a slight lean to the side. And then also, if you guys have this machine or something very similar to this where it's a lateral raise, you need to be doing it just because it's super stable and you can load up a lot of weight, right? You don't have to worry about it. Look at this guy, he's doing the full stack. This is me right here. But anyways, this is what you want to be doing, right? This is the kind of stuff that you should be doing just because it's a machine exercise, which means you can just do a fuck ton of weight and spam it out. And especially if you're a beginner, if you're not using machines like this and you don't have form kind of locked down yet, you need to be doing these. And then finally, you can also be doing lateral raises, right? Or like an overhead press, kind of like this. Obviously, this is going to be more of your front delt. These are obviously mainly just your lateral delt. But the thing is, you need to be focused on your reps, okay? And you need to actually maintain good form because you can't just like kind of go through the motions with these. You really need to focus on good form, right? Tight core and not swinging too high like this guy, or, you know, just kind of like fucking throwing the weight up. You need to have slow and controlled movements, and I promise you, your shoulders are going to explode. And finally, if you're not doing at least, I would say 6 to 10 sets per week, if you have a frame like this where you have very narrow clavicles, then yeah, you need to be spamming at least like 6 to 10 sets per week. All right, number 3 is gonna be your lats. So a lot of people think that your lats are kind of just like a back thing. You only see this from the back. However, fully developed lats will flare out to the front, right? You see this here, right? Look, you can see how it wraps around from the side here and it kind of fuses with your serratus anterior, right? And this is what really builds that width from any angle, okay? From the side, front, back, you know, this right here is what's going to give you that width. The issue is though, most guys are doing a lot of lat pull downs with their elbows going straight down in a more like narrow grip. I see a lot of guys in the gym like this where it's like they're not going super wide. To get this, right, you need to be hitting more of your upper lats. All right, this is your upper lats that actually flares out from the side. So instead, what you need to be doing is a wider grip like this, and it shows you here how to do it, right? You see the bar just a little bit wider, and this is all going to be upper lats here, right? And that's going to build your width on your lats. And when you're doing it, not just pull down, you want to be pulling out and down. All right, another great exercise if you're not doing these is you need to be doing pull-ups, especially if they're weighted too. This is just all around a great back builder because it can target every part of your back, and depending on your grip, you can emphasize which parts you want to do. Especially for, as you see here, pull-ups, yeah, they're great for biceps, so that's a great way for building biceps on your pull days as well. And then it's also going to be training a lot of your lats as well when you're doing pull-ups, not just biceps. It's a great lat builder overall because you get such a deep stretch, so you need to be doing these. Also, another super underrated exercise is this here. This right here is probably one of the greatest exercises for your entire upper body. Now, why am I saying that? Because it trains your upper chest, right? And that's huge for aesthetics, your upper chest. It also trains, as you can see, your lats here, specifically the part we're talking about, and then your serratus, which makes you appear wider. That's kind of like this little like rib cage sort of looking muscle here. And then it's also going to be training your triceps and core if you're doing it like this. Although you're going to be hitting your core on this as well, just less so. But this variation specifically gives you more core activation, right? Because you have to stabilize the movement. And then also, this is just going to build your whole upper body now because you're doing everything essentially. If you spam these, I promise you, your upper body is going to change fast. If you're not doing pullovers, you need to be doing them. Finally, the last thing I'm just going to say is it's important to know that your lats are what makes the shoulder to waist ratio, which makes you look wider. So let's talk about it. All right, it's not the number of the shoulder itself, it's the number divided by your waist, okay? In other words, a small waist, right, gives you the appearance of a wider top. The guys that typically have a very, very wide looking top, it's just that they have a very narrow waist. And I'll give you an example here. Let's go back to this. Look at this guy, for example. Yeah, sure, he does have big lats, but check this out. It's also the fact that he has like no fucking waistline. Like, look at this. You see how he has no waistline? That overemphasizes the lats. So here we have some good ratios. The 1:6 ratio though is kind of like what we're aiming for, and it's called the Adonis ratio. So a 1:6 shoulder to waist ratio is kind of the ideal here. The Dorito shape here, you know, isn't just about your shoulder measurements, right? It's actually the contrast, which means we have to be focusing on our core and obliques, right? Obliques are just one muscle you actively do not want to overload with mass. Thick obliques will make your waist here look super blockier, as you can kind of see with this guy. And I've seen this a lot in the gym where it's like guys will just spam weighted cable crunches and heavy side bends for years. You end up looking like this. Like, it's not very aesthetic at all. Like, yes, do girls like this somewhat, but you want the V, right? So you don't really want to have chunky waistline like this guy. You want to think about toning your obliques. So no heavy movements like this. Like, do not be doing weighted fucking crunches and shit and all this other stuff. You want to think more about like toning it. Instead, you should be doing shit like this, like planks, leg raises. You need to be doing it up against a seat and not just hanging off of a bar or whatever, because you're just going to be using more of your abductors if it's, you know, just you hanging there. If you have your ass and your core up against something and bracing, it's a lot less abductors and it's more core. So keep that in mind. And then crunches, spamming a lot of crunches and all that, it's great. If you just do these, you just need to tone it, and that's how you avoid the big blocky gym cell waist. All right, and lastly, your bone growth window, okay? Everyone says that you can't change your clavicle width after 25 or so. That's because when your growth plates close, that's sort of the range. It is true relatively, but here's kind of the most important thing that actually happens during your development. You know, when you're growing, your bone isn't just growing in length when you're growing up. If you're working out, it's also being reshaped under load. The stimulus of heavy mechanical stress through your shoulder area is going to have a massive ROI on making you appear wider. If you're under, let's say, 33 and you're not doing overhead presses, you know, wide grip pulling motions, or, you know, lateral raises like we discussed earlier, you're leaving a lot of gains on the table by not doing these things, especially these. when your clavicles haven't fused, these are insane for building shoulders. Any sort of overhead pressing movement. You don't have to do a barbell, you can use machines too, but you need to be doing this because if your plates haven't fused yet, meaning you still have a lot of time to widen your shoulders, you need to be doing so because that window closes eventually. It doesn't make sense to not do this, especially at this sort of age range. Anywhere between the late teens and early 30s is kind of what you're looking at. And the guys who are training heavy through their teenage years and into their early 20s, they're not just building more muscle, they're also building a wider frame on top of it. And that's kind of the same thing with Wolff's Law, right? It's the same principle for bone smashing. You know, everything else on this list is still going to apply, but the muscles around the bone are still trainable. And of course, the ratios are still trainable. So don't lose hope, right? And you can still always get the clothing that I talked about. But if you want to learn how to get a V-taper, check out this video here.